Clara's life was about to change in a way she could never have predicted. The death of her mother, Maria, had left a deep void in her heart, but it also brought to the surface a series of questions she had never allowed herself to explore. Who was Maria before she became her mother? What secrets did she keep behind that serene smile and loving gaze? These questions hammered in Clara's mind, but it was only during an ordinary afternoon, while sorting through her deceased mother's belongings, that she began to uncover answers that would shake the foundations of everything she thought she knew about her family. It was a diary, hidden in an old dusty box, that would lead her to unravel her mother's past. A past far more intricate and surprising than Clara could have ever imagined. Now we ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel to help us grow and reach other people to receive our content. Your engagement is very important to us. Thank you. Clara had always known that one day she would have to face the daunting task of organizing her mother's house, but she never imagined it would be so painful. Every object she touched seemed to be imbued with memories, filled with hidden meanings that only her mother could have explained. Old photos, silk scarves faded with time, small mementos from trips Maria had never mentioned. As Clara sifted through these objects, it felt as if she was unearthing a part of her own history. A history that, until that moment, had seemed simple and without great mysteries. Then she found the box. Hidden at the back of a closet, covered in layers of dust, was an ornate wooden box that Clara had never seen before. Curiosity drove her to open the box, but what she found inside was far more than simple keepsakes. There was a diary, its pages yellowed and fragile with age, as if the secrets it contained had been waiting decades to be revealed. Clara hesitated for a moment, feeling a strange sense of intrusion. It was as if she was about to open a window into her mother's past, something Maria had never shared, perhaps because she wanted to keep those memories locked away forever. But the temptation was too great. With trembling hands, Clara opened the diary to the first page. Her mother's handwriting was elegant, almost artistic, each letter meticulously drawn. The diary began innocently enough, with Maria describing her days as a young woman in the 1970s. But as Clara read on, the words began to paint a much more complex and dark picture. Maria was not just the loving and devoted mother Clara had known. She was a woman with dreams, desires, and secrets that had never been mentioned. The first entries in the diary were simple, almost mundane. Accounts of meetings with friends, descriptions of the weather, notes about books she was reading. But soon the tone began to change. Clara read about a man named Ricardo, someone her mother mentioned with an intensity that Clara had never witnessed in her family stories. Ricardo seemed to be more than just a friend. There was a passion in Maria's words that Clara had never associated with her mother. With her heart racing, Clara turned the page and came across a confession that left her stunned. Maria had planned to run away with Ricardo, abandoning everything to follow her dream of becoming an artist in Paris. The plan, however, was aborted at the last minute due to a series of circumstances that Maria did not specify clearly. Clara tried to imagine her mother, so young and full of life, ready to leave her family and follow a forbidden love. It was a version of Maria that she did not recognize, but one she could not get out of her mind. As Clara continued to read, more details emerged. Maria wrote about the pressure from her family to marry the right man, about the nights she cried alone, torn between her duty and her desires. The words in the diary were so vivid that Clara could almost feel her mother's anguish and internal conflict. It was as if she were living those experiences alongside her, feeling her pain and understanding her dilemmas. Clara read for hours, unable to put the diary down. Each new page revealed a different facet of Maria, increasingly distant from the image of the mother Clara had known. The diary detailed the sacrifices Maria had made, the dreams she had buried to follow a safer path, to become the wife and mother everyone expected her to be. Clara began to see the similarities between her own life and her mother's, the choices they both made, the dreams they abandoned, the loves they sacrificed in the name of responsibility and safety. What disturbed Clara the most was the feeling that her own life was following a similar path to her mother's. She had married young, had children early, and devoted most of her life to her family, often setting aside her own ambitions and desires. Clara wondered if, like her mother, she was also conforming to a life of silent sacrifices, never truly pursuing her own dreams. As she closed the diary late at night, Clara felt a mixture of emotions: sadness, anger, but also a deep admiration for Maria. Her mother had been an extraordinary woman, far more complex and resilient than Clara could have ever imagined. And now, Clara found herself at a crossroads. She could continue living her life the same way, ignoring the desires that simmered inside her, or she could be inspired by her mother's courage and finally seek what truly made her happy. That night, Clara could not sleep. Maria's words echoed in her mind, like a call to something greater, something she could no longer ignore. The diary was not just a window to the past. It was a mirror reflecting the future Clara could have, if she had the courage to follow her dreams. As dawn broke, Clara made a decision. She would not let her life become a repetition of the past. Inspired by Maria's story, Clara was determined to change the course of her own life, to explore the dreams she had let sleep for so long. And so, with her mother's diary in hand, Clara took the first step toward a journey of self-discovery that would change everything. With each new page of the diary, Clara felt more and more immersed in her mother's life. It was as if a door had been opened to a past she never imagined existed. The words written decades ago began to create vivid images in her mind, transporting her to a time when Maria, her mother, was not the responsible and predictable maternal figure she had known, but a young woman full of dreams, fears, and passions. As Clara delved into Maria's memories, she began to realize that her mother's past was not so different from her own life, and this revelation deeply troubled her. Clara was sitting on the couch, the diary resting on her lap, when she began reading a passage dated 1972. Maria's handwriting was meticulous, almost as if each word had been carefully chosen, weighing its meaning. In this entry, Maria described her dream of becoming a recognized artist. She spoke of painting as if it were an extension of her own soul, an inescapable need that filled her with life and purpose. For Clara, it was difficult to associate this young dreamer with the practical and family-focused woman Maria had become. Maria had started studying art as a teenager, attending evening classes in a small studio downtown. Her passion for drawing and painting shone through every sentence, and Clara could almost feel her mother's youthful enthusiasm as she described her first creations. However, as Clara continued reading, she noticed a shift in the tone of the diary. Maria's words became heavier, laden with a melancholy that Clara had never seen in her during her lifetime. At 19, Maria met Ricardo, a young architecture student who attended the same art classes. He was passionate about life, full of grand ideas about how the world should be and how they could transform it through their creations. The relationship between Maria and Ricardo blossomed quickly, and soon their romance became the center of Maria's life. She described the moments they spent together as magical, filled with an intensity that made Clara wonder if she had ever experienced anything like it. But the world around Maria was not so understanding. The society of the time, especially in her small town, did not look kindly upon a young woman who devoted herself to artistic dreams and impetuous loves. The pressure for Maria to follow a more traditional path, such as marriage and starting a family, grew with each passing day. Maria's parents, who had initially supported her studies, began to suggest that perhaps it was time to set aside those art things and think about the future. As Clara read, she felt a growing pain as she realized how her mother's dreams were gradually suppressed. The diary detailed Maria's internal struggles, the constant battle between her desire to follow her dreams and the pressure to conform to societal expectations. Ricardo was her confidant, but even he began to change over time. The romance that had once been an escape from reality started to become a source of conflict, with Ricardo insisting they run away together, abandoning everything to pursue a life dedicated to art in Paris. Clara found herself completely immersed in that time, feeling the anguish and fear her mother must have felt. Maria was torn between two worlds, the world of infinite possibilities that Ricardo represented and the world of responsibilities imposed by her family and society. And then, in the next passage, Clara discovered the breaking point. Maria wrote about the night Ricardo showed up at her house with 2 tickets to Paris. He was determined to leave everything behind and start a new life with her. Maria, though tempted, hesitated. She knew that accepting his proposal would mean severing all ties with her family and the world she knew. Maria's decision that night was one of the most difficult she ever made, and Clara could feel the weight of that choice in her mother's carefully chosen words. In the end, Maria decided not to go. She wrote about the pain of watching Ricardo leave alone, about the feeling that a part of her soul had been torn away. Clara could almost see her younger mother, watching Ricardo disappear into the night, her heart breaking with a decision that, at the time, seemed the only possible one. Maria chose to stay, choosing security and family over dreams and love. After finishing that entry, Clara closed the diary for a moment, needing to breathe. The similarities between Maria's life and her own were undeniable. Like her mother, Clara had also buried dreams in the name of responsibility and security. She had married young, dedicated her life to her children, and never allowed herself to pursue the ambitions she had when she was younger. And now, at 40, she felt trapped in a routine that didn't bring the happiness she once imagined. Maria's words echoed in Clara's mind. The diary, which had started as a simple curiosity, was now shaping Clara's perception of her own life. She couldn't help but think about how many opportunities she had missed, how many times she had said no to herself in the name of something that, in the end, didn't fulfill her completely. More than that, Clara began to question if there was still time to change. Clara spent the rest of the day lost in thought, Maria's diary by her side. She knew there were more stories within those pages, more secrets and decisions that shaped the woman Maria had become. But above all, Clara realized that her mother had lived a much richer and more complex life than she had ever imagined. And perhaps, just perhaps, Clara could learn from Maria's mistakes and sacrifices to rediscover who she really was. As night fell, Clara made a decision. She would continue reading the diary the next day, but this time with a different purpose. It wasn't just about getting to know her mother. It was about rediscovering herself. Maria hadn't pursued her dreams to the end, but that didn't mean Clara couldn't do so. And with this newfound determination, Clara prepared to dive even deeper into her mother's past, hoping to find not only answers but also the courage necessary to change the course of her own life. The dawn brought a new determination to Clara. The restlessness from the night before still echoed in her mind, but now it was accompanied by an urgency to discover more about her mother's secret life. Maria, whom Clara had always known as a practical woman devoted to her family, was revealing layers of her life that Clara had never imagined existed. She knew she needed to continue reading the diary, but something inside her said there was more to uncover if she allowed herself to explore every corner of that house. With a cup of coffee in hand and Maria's diary by her side, Clara decided to start the day by organizing some boxes that were still piled up in her mother's old room. There was something about those boxes that had always bothered her, as if they were hiding secrets that, until now, weren't meant to be revealed. Clara knew this was the right time to confront these secrets. She began opening the boxes, one by one, carefully removing the objects Maria had kept. The first boxes contained ordinary items: old clothes, kitchen utensils, childhood mementos of Clara. However, one specific box, heavier and covered in a thin layer of dust, caught her attention. Upon opening it, Clara found a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon and a small wooden box, which seemed to hold something precious. Curious, Clara unwrapped the ribbon and began to read the letters. The first one was from a man named Henry, someone Clara had never heard of before. The letter was filled with passion, full of promises and declarations of eternal love. He wrote about secret meetings and plans for a life together, far away from everyone and everything. The words overflowed with such intense emotion that Clara felt a tightness in her chest. Who was this man? And why had Maria never mentioned him? The second letter, dated a few months later, revealed something even more surprising. Henry mentioned a second man, Alexander, and begged Maria to choose between them. The tone of the letter was desperate, as if Henry knew he was about to lose the woman he loved to another. Clara's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation her mother had faced. Maria was caught in a love triangle, and the choice she made between these two men clearly shaped the rest of her life. Feeling almost guilty for invading such an intimate part of her mother's life, Clara reached for the small wooden box. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs. The first photo was of Maria and Henry, smiling at each other in a park Clara recognized as the place where her mother used to take her to play when she was a child. The second photo, however, was different. Maria was standing next to Alexander, a man Clara didn't know either, but who appeared much more reserved and serious than Henry. They were in front of a small country house that Clara also didn't recognize. The last photo showed Maria and Alexander in more intimate moments, like a stolen kiss or a tight embrace, suggesting a deep bond. Clara felt the weight of the revelations as she tried to process everything she had discovered. Her mother had been torn between two loves, and the choice she made was final. But which one did she choose? The diary hadn't mentioned these names until now, and Clara knew she needed to keep reading to find out how this story ended. With a heavy heart, Clara returned to the diary, eagerly searching for the next entries that might shed light on this part of her mother's life. She found a passage written a few days after Henry's last letter. In it, Maria described how suffocated she felt by the pressure of choosing between two such different paths. On one side, Henry offered a life of adventure and passion, an escape from reality to a world where Maria could be the artist she had always wanted to be. On the other side, Alexander represented stability, security, and a life within the expectations of society and her family. Maria was torn between the desire to follow her heart and the need to meet others' expectations. Clara recognized this struggle. She herself had sacrificed her dreams for the sake of security and family, just like her mother. The difference was that Clara was discovering this too late to change the past, but perhaps she still had time to alter the future. Clara realized that Maria's choice between Henry and Alexander wasn't just about love but about her own identity. Henry represented the freedom to be who she wanted to be, without restraints, while Alexander symbolized the comfort of a predictable and safe life. But whom did she choose? Clara read every word of the next entry with a mix of anxiety and fear. Finally, Maria revealed in her diary the decision she had made. She chose Alexander. The reasons were complex, but deep down, Maria felt she couldn't risk everything for a love that, no matter how passionate, wouldn't give her the security needed to build a life. She opted for what was safe, but not without deep regret. The diary detailed Maria's pain as she said goodbye to Henry, the feeling that a part of her was dying along with that farewell. Clara closed the diary, tears silently streaming down her face. She felt a deep sadness, not only for her mother but for herself. In a way, Clara had also chosen security over her own dreams, never allowing herself to truly take a risk. But unlike her mother, Clara still had the chance to change. She stood up, determined not to let Maria's sacrifice be in vain. There was still much to discover in the diary's pages, and in the letters Henry and Alexander had written to Maria. But for now, Clara knew she needed a moment to reflect on everything she had read. Her life up to that point seemed so small, so confined, compared to the rich tapestry of emotions and choices her mother had lived through. And with this new understanding, Clara began to question everything she thought she knew about love, happiness, and above all, about the woman her mother had been, and the woman Clara wanted to become. With the diary in hand, Clara sat on the edge of her mother's bed, where Maria had likely spent many nights reflecting on her decisions. There, Clara promised herself that she wouldn't let life pass by without exploring all its possibilities. She would pursue her dreams, those deep desires that had been ignored until now. And as she continued to read the remaining pages of the diary, Clara knew that she was only beginning to uncover not just her mother's past, but also her own future. Clara woke up the next morning with a new determination coursing through her veins. The previous night had been one of reflection, Maria's diary words echoing in her mind like a call to action. Clara knew she couldn't keep living a life of regrets and sacrifices, especially now that she understood the weight of these choices in her own mother. Maria had set her dreams aside, but Clara refused to do the same. After a quick breakfast, Clara walked to the old wooden desk in the corner of the room. It was the same desk where, years ago, she spent hours studying for her college exams. Sitting there now brought a feeling of nostalgia mixed with regret. She vividly remembered her own dreams and aspirations, from when she was a young woman full of energy, eager to conquer the world. She wanted to be a writer, dreamed of traveling the world, and documenting her experiences in lively chronicles. But life had other plans: marriage, children, a stable job, and gradually those vibrant dreams were silenced. Clara opened a drawer and found an old notebook, its pages still blank, waiting to be filled with ideas and stories. She ran her fingers along the edges of the notebook, remembering how she felt every time she started a new story, how writing made her feel alive, connected to herself in a way nothing else could. Inspired by Maria's diary, Clara decided it was time to revisit those dreams. She picked up a pen and, hesitant at first, began to write. The first words were difficult, but as the ink flowed across the page, a sense of relief washed over her. It was as if each word brought her closer to a forgotten part of herself. While writing, Clara felt a wave of emotions: anger for allowing her dreams to be buried, sadness for missed opportunities, but above all, a deep gratitude. Gratitude for discovering Maria's journal, for having the chance to learn from her mother's life before it was too late. Clara knew she was on the right path, even if that path was new and frightening. In the days that followed, Clara began to make more concrete decisions. She started looking into creative writing courses, something she had always wanted to do but never had the courage or time. She found an evening course at the local university and, though nervous, decided to enroll. It was a small step, but for Clara, it represented much more. It was a promise to herself that this time, she would not let her dreams die. In addition to returning to study, Clara also began reconnecting with old friends, people who had been important in her life before time and responsibilities had separated them. One afternoon, while organizing some old photos, she found a picture of her college friends, laughing and embracing during a summer trip. She remembered how that group had meant everything to her, how they had shared dreams and hopes for the future. Determined to reconnect, Clara picked up the phone and started making some calls. The first person she spoke to was Anna, her best friend from college. They hadn't spoken in years, but the conversation flowed as if no time had passed. Anna was thrilled to hear from Clara, and soon they arranged a meeting. Other calls followed, and soon Clara found herself reconnecting with people who had helped shape who she was. The reunion with Anna was particularly significant. They met at a cafe where they used to spend hours talking about life, the future, and all their grand plans. Sitting there, Clara and Anna laughed, reminisced about old stories, and talked about the paths their lives had taken. Anna, who had pursued a career in art, encouraged Clara to chase her dreams with all her might. "It's never too late to be who you've always wanted to be," Anna said, holding Clara's hand with a look of sincere support. Clara knew she needed to hear those words. They echoed deep in her soul, reinforcing the courage she was beginning to build. Clara also reconnected with other old passions. She began attending painting classes, an activity that always relaxed her and made her feel creative. Painting became a form of expression that connected her not only with her past but also with her present, allowing her to visualize a more colorful and vibrant future. As Clara followed this new path, she realized that the changes in her life were beginning to impact her family as well. Her children, initially surprised by their mother's change in attitude, began to support her, admiring her courage and determination. Her husband, who was initially baffled by the changes, eventually grew closer to her, recognizing that Clara was finally becoming the woman she was always meant to be. Clara's journey was not without challenges. There were moments of doubt, nights when she questioned whether she was doing the right thing, whether it was really possible to rediscover and follow her dreams after so much time. But every time these doubts arose, she remembered her mother, the difficult choices Maria had made, and the words written in the journal. Maria did not have the chance to follow her dreams, but Clara did, and she would not let this chance slip away. With each new day, Clara felt more connected to the woman she was becoming. She learned to value her own desires and to understand that to take care of others, she also needed to take care of herself. Through writing, painting, and renewed connections with old friends, Clara began to live a more authentic life, more aligned with who she truly was. The journey of rediscovery was far from over, but Clara was willing to face it with courage, knowing that by following in her mother's footsteps, she was finally allowing herself to be the woman she always wanted to be. Clara closed the journal with a deep sigh. Her mother's last words still echoed in her mind, a mix of memories, confessions, and lessons that Maria had left behind. Throughout the pages, Clara had discovered a woman she had never fully known, a woman full of courage, love, and sacrifices, whose choices had shaped not only her life but also her daughter's. Sitting in her living room, Clara held the journal close to her chest, as if she could absorb the strength and wisdom her mother had left on those yellowed pages. She felt as if she had traveled a long journey, one that not only took her into the past but also showed her a path to the future. What Maria had lived, her pains and triumphs, were now part of Clara's own story, a legacy she was determined to honor. Standing up from her chair, Clara walked to the window, looking out at the horizon. The house where she had grown up and where Maria had spent her last days now seemed different, filled with new energy, a new purpose. Clara knew that from that moment on, she could no longer live as before. What her mother had shown her was more than just a retrospective of a past life. It was a map, a guide on how to live with passion, authenticity, and courage. Clara made a decision at that moment. She needed a fresh start, a new beginning that reflected everything she had learned. She decided she would sell her mother's house, a place full of memories, but that she now felt she could no longer call home. Instead of clinging to the past, Clara wanted to create new memories, in a new space, where she could flourish without the shadows of old responsibilities. That same week, Clara put the house up for sale. The process was more emotional than she had imagined, but each step was a reaffirmation of her new journey. When a young couple became interested in the house and eventually bought it, Clara felt a sense of peace. She knew that the place that held so many memories would now serve as the stage for new stories and new lives to begin there. With the sale of the house, Clara made another decision. She would move to a new city. She chose a place that had always fascinated her but that she had never had the chance to explore, a small coastal town where green hills met the ocean. The sound of the waves, the salty breeze, and the promise of a quieter and more introspective life called to her. Clara knew that this change was not just physical but symbolic. She was leaving behind not only her mother's house but also the version of herself that had been lost amid obligations and expectations. As she settled into her new home, Clara felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The change was drastic, and at times the uncertainty made her anxious, but she remembered her mother's words. Life is full of risks, but it's those risks that make us grow. With those words as her mantra, Clara began to build her new life. One of the first things she did was return to writing. In her new home, she set up a small office with a view of the sea, a space where she could lose herself in her words and thoughts. The notebook she had started filling out some time ago was now full of ideas, stories, and reflections. Writing had become not only a revived passion but also a form of self-expression, a way to connect with herself and with Maria's memories. Clara also began to explore the town, making new friends and rediscovering the joy of small things. Walking on the beach at dawn, having coffee in small local bakeries, and watching the sunset from the hilltops. Each day brought a new discovery, a new opportunity to live on her own terms, without fear of judgment or the expectations of others. The memories of her mother were never far from her thoughts. Clara often found herself talking to Maria in her mind, as if seeking approval or advice. But over time, these imaginary conversations began to change. Clara realized she no longer needed Maria's approval or anyone else's. She was finally living her own life, making her own choices, and that realization brought a peace she had never experienced before. Clara also returned to studying as she had planned. She enrolled in online creative writing courses and attended local workshops, where she met others who, like her, were looking for new directions in life. The act of learning again, of expanding her mind and skills, filled Clara with renewed vigor. She knew it was never too late to pursue a dream, and she was determined to do just that. One day, while walking along the beach, Clara stopped and looked out at the vast ocean before her. She felt a deep connection to the world around her, as if she had finally found her place. The wind caressed her face, and the sound of the waves brought a melody that soothed her soul. There, in that moment, Clara realized she didn't need a final destination for her journey. Happiness was in the journey itself, in the steps she took every day, in the dreams she continued to pursue. The future was in her hands, and for the first time, Clara felt fully prepared to embrace it. With the past as her guide and inspiration, Clara walked toward the future with confidence and determination, ready to write the next chapter of her life with the passion and authenticity she had always deserved.